Thank you very much for joining us. We're joined by Rebecca Henderson, professor at Harvard Business School, a thinker about business, about capitalism, but also about where the world is headed. And a lot of your work has looked at business and how in the last few decades, business has tried to rethink purpose and rather than just shareholder value. What do you think some of the lessons are for the public sector from what's happened in the world of business?
Business has begun to embrace a completely different way of operating. It's called running a high commitment organization. So what is a high commitment organization? It's an organization that believes that making money or making a profit is a means to an end, not an end in itself. The goal of the firm is to create great jobs, produce wonderful products, make a difference to the community in which it's embedded. Of course, you need to make money and be efficient to do that, but our purpose is to create a flourishing community, to help build a flourishing world. That's easy to say, but where the rubber meets the road is in how you actually do that on the ground. And you do that on the ground by trusting the people that work for you, by bringing them into this sense of purpose and mission, by paying them decent wages and giving them decent jobs, and then giving them the freedom to do what they know how to do. So this is sort of the Toyota production system meets we really need to change the world. And it's that combination that can really drive superior performance. In contrast, there are low performance organizations, and they're the ones that manage people as if they were cogs in a wheel, that use monetary metrics instead of really drawing on the deep inner part of a human being that wants to do meaningful work. You just say, no, show up, we'll pay you, move your right hand. And that doesn't trust, doesn't let power flow down the organization, doesn't support human growth, that basically thinks of people as things and manages just for the bottom line.
So in principle, many public organizations should be very high commitment, teachers who really want to, help learning, doctors helping people care. But there is a view that actually if you give too much autonomy to those people, you'll end up with stagnation, low performance, inefficiency, and so on. Why does high commitment actually lead to better performance?
Well, it only leads to better performance if you really make sure the organization supports what you're trying to do. So my colleague Zeynep Tan at MIT has done an enormous amount of work on how you need to reorganize work if you're really to see high performance. If you simply say, oh, we're mission driven, but then you don't give individuals the resources they need to get their job done, if you overwhelm them with paperwork, if you hem them in so they can't make decisions, if you don't build the kind of rich communication and team structures that are essential to high-performance organizations. So it's not just one teacher in his classroom. It's not just one doctor in her office. It's a team focused together on how we really serve our customers and our students, deeply rooted in their sense of purpose, deeply rooted in mission, and totally supported by the rest of the organization. This is not an easy thing to do. It gives superlative results.
So how do we think about these models in a world which is pretty unstable, unpredictable, where all sorts of crises may be worsening? You've written about this, a world on fire. It sometimes does look like a world on fire. What does that mean for the design of public institutions?
I think it's good news, because we don't have the luxury of running slow bureaucracies where everyone follows procedure anymore. We don't have that luxury because we don't have the resources. As our world comes under increasing stress, we're all going to have to do more with less. We don't have the luxury because there's an incredible source of human motivation and commitment that we're leaving untapped. If people show up at work and go through the motions, you're leaving half of themselves on the ground. I mean, my own research and the research of many others suggests that high commitment organizations can be as much as 3 times as productive as low commitment organizations. I mean, this is an empirical result that I spent years in windowless conference rooms trying to make go away, because economists just couldn't believe that properly motivating people and really organizing work and focusing on a common goal could make that much difference. It had to be the quality of the capital equipment or the nature of the budgeting process. No, it's all about managing the human capital. And we have an opportunity to use the crises that are coming at us to restructure work so it truly supports humans working together in service of the common good.
And given instability, unpredictability, how do you think organizations, institutions should best sort of navigate between, on the one hand, resilience, adapting very fast to change, versus missions, which are traditionally actually much more stable and fixed and they last for a while? Are those not often in tension in reality?
I just spent 20 years of my career studying exactly that tension. I think of it as the tension between running existing operations, steady as she goes, keep it calm, and oh my goodness, we have all these new things to do. So the answer to your question is very carefully. And it's critically important. And as we're talking, it sounds obvious, but often it's not obvious in an organization that you manage those two kinds of activities differently. So you have a group that's thinking about the existing mission, existing operations. How do we introduce these better ways of managing? How do we keep them operating? How do we make them more efficient? That's incredibly important. But it's very different from the 2 or 3 or 4 small groups you want to set up to say, okay, we have all these new missions. How are we going to go after them? How should we design it? Very important to give those small groups the best people you have, autonomy, and I know this is hard in public institutions, super hard. It's really hard in the private sector. You've got to give them enough money to do something and manage them using different metrics. If you apply the metrics from the existing business as usual onto these new agile groups, you will kill them, because they're R&D groups, they're innovation groups, they're research and development. This doesn't mean you write a huge check and leave them alone for a year. No, it means you have different kinds of conversations. You ask them for milestones that they think make sense. You keep in touch, you keep connected, but you let them try new things.
Give them some air to breathe. And obviously you're an
Exactly.
expert on business, but I wonder if you might just speculate a little bit about the division of labor in relation to high commitment and missions and purpose and so on, as between the politicians, elected politicians, and the bureaucrats, because they both do have an important role in defining the nature of public institutions and their purposes, certainly in democracies.
You realize you're talking to someone who's sitting in the United States, where the difference between the currently elected executive and the bureaucrat's view of government could not be more stark. And I think that highlights a deep tension. So in general, horrible generalization, many politicians are focused on the short term and are looking to meet the immediate needs of their constituents, and that's appropriate. But that can sometimes be in tension with the need to have a strong bureaucracy, a strong, flexible, responsive bureaucracy that meets the needs of its citizens. One of the things I've learned from studying the private sector, paradoxically, is just how important government is. The image I use in my teaching is that of a balance beam or a seesaw. I'm a huge fan of free markets, properly controlled, because free markets generate innovation and creativity and give freedom to individuals to make choices, but they need to be properly controlled. If companies, for example, can control the politicians so that they set the regulations, so that they can throw any kind of toxic poison into the river or emit huge quantities of greenhouse gas with no consequences, if they can drive wages and working conditions to the bottom so that every firm that's trying to compete has to create horrible, dangerous, dirty jobs, that's not creating a flourishing society. So it's always balance, right? Too much market, you get ruled by the oligarchs and crony capitalism. Too much government, you get the dead hand of government and over-regulation. So this is in principle what a good democracy is balancing. What politicians should be constantly aware of is that need to balance, and hopefully able to communicate that to their constituents.
Healthy capitalism needs a healthy government, not no government at all.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah,
no government gets you kleptocracy and
yeah.
chaos. You don't want no government.
So a final question to you is really, what would your message be to the people working on innovation in the public sector all over the world, often in very difficult circumstances, often without enough money, sometimes not enough political backing, and against a backdrop of lots of instability? Final message to the innovators.
Take care of yourself. We talk about institutional resilience, but individual resilience is the bedrock of everything. I don't just mean get enough sleep and exercise properly, although if you're not doing that, you really need to do that. I mean, develop a personal practice that centers and grounds, that connects you to your deepest values. Find a group of friends, a sangha, a church, a book group, I don't care, but a group of friends who share your values and your vision for change so you can mutually support yourself in these difficult, difficult times.
Thank you, because it will be difficult and you need to stick to it as part of your
Well,
public
we
purpose and
need to
commitment.
stick to it.
Yeah.
I mean, the good news is there's lots to be done. There's enormous opportunity here, lots of change, but it's not going to be a walk in the park.
Thank you very much, Rebecca Henderson.